I'm recording this because no one will believe me if I just tell them. They'll think I'm lying, or worse, that I've lost my mind. Maybe I have. Maybe what happened that night broke something in me that can't be fixed. But I don't think so. I think it opened something instead. Showed me that the world is bigger and stranger and more heartbreaking than I ever imagined. And I need to tell someone, even if that someone is just you, watching this on a screen, deciding whether to believe me or scroll past. My name is Sarah Kellerman. I'm 34 years old. I live in northern Michigan, about 20 miles outside of Traverse City. I'm a third-grade teacher. I have a golden retriever named Murphy. I drive a Honda Civic. I'm as ordinary as they come. Or at least I was, until 3 months ago when I met something that shouldn't exist. Something that changed everything I thought I knew about the world and what lives in it alongside us. Before I tell you what happened, I need to ask you something. If you want to hear this story, if you're willing to listen with an open mind and an open heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. I'm not monetizing this. I'm not selling anything. I just need this story to exist somewhere other than my own memory. So please subscribe and let me tell you about the night I met a child who wasn't human but was more human than I could have ever expected. I've always been a night person. Even as a kid, I'd stay up late reading or just staring out the window at the darkness. There's something peaceful about the night, the way the world quiets down and you can hear yourself think. After I moved to Michigan 5 years ago, I fell in love with the forests here. Miles and miles of woodland, lakes everywhere. Wildlife you'd never see in the city. I started taking evening walks, sometimes after dinner, sometimes later. Just Murphy and me, walking the back roads and trails near my house. People warned me about walking alone at night. Said it wasn't safe. But I'd been doing it for years without incident. I carried pepper spray, had my phone, kept to familiar routes. Murphy was big and protective. Felt safe. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I was lucky. Either way, I kept walking. The area where I live is rural. My nearest neighbor is half a mile away. The road I live on is barely paved, more like a glorified dirt track that winds through dense forest. There are old logging trails throughout the woods, some of them barely visible anymore, reclaimed by undergrowth and time. But if you know where to look, you can still follow them. They lead to clearings, old campsites, places where loggers used to work decades ago before the operations moved elsewhere. I heard stories, of course. Michigan has a long history of cryptid sightings. The Dogman legend goes back to the late 1800s. Reports of creatures that walk upright like humans but have the head and features of a canine. Wolf-like but not wolves. Too large, too intelligent, too deliberately bipedal. Most people treat it like folklore. Campfire stories to scare tourists. I'd always been skeptical. Not dismissive but skeptical. I figured if something like that existed, we'd have concrete evidence by now. Photos, bodies, something definitive. But there were nights when I'd be walking with Murphy and he'd stop. Just freeze in the middle of the trail, ears forward, body tense. He'd stare into the darkness, a low growl rumbling in his chest. See nothing. Hear nothing. But Murphy would refuse to move forward, would pull back toward home. Dogs know things we don't. They sense things we can't. I learned to trust his instincts. The night it happened was early September. The weather was just starting to turn cool, that transition from summer to autumn where the air gets crisp and the leaves begin to change. I'd finished grading papers around 9 p.m. and decided to take Murphy for a walk before bed. The moon was nearly full, bright enough to see without a flashlight. We took our usual route, a loop that followed the road for a mile before cutting onto one of the old logging trails and circling back. Murphy was in a good mood. Tail wagging, nose to the ground, investigating every interesting smell. We were about halfway through the loop, deep in the forest section, when he stopped. That sudden freeze I'd seen before. But this time was different. He wasn't growling. He was whining. A high-pitched, distressed sound I'd never heard him make before. His whole body was shaking. I looked in the direction he was staring. Saw nothing at first. Just trees and shadows and moonlight filtering through the canopy. Then I heard it. A sound that made my blood run cold. It was crying. Not animal crying. Human crying. Child crying. High-pitched, desperate, terrified. Coming from somewhere off the trail, deeper in the woods. Every instinct told me to run. You don't follow sounds in the forest at night. You don't investigate crying that could be anything. But I'm a teacher. I work with children. That sound, that desperate sobbing, it overrode my fear. What if it was a real child? What if someone was lost or hurt? I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight and called out. Hello. Are you okay? Where are you? The crying stopped. Complete silence. Murphy pressed against my leg, still shaking. I waited, listening. Then quietly a voice. Small and broken and speaking words I could barely make out. Help. Please, help. It was coming from about 50 feet off the trail, in a small depression between two large oak trees. I moved toward it slowly, my flashlight beam sweeping back and forth. Murphy refused to follow. He sat down on the trail and watched me go, whining but not moving. I reached the depression and pointed my light down into it. What I saw made my mind stutter. Made reality feel suddenly unstable. There was something there. Huddled against the base of one of the oaks. Small, maybe the size of a 10-year-old child. But it wasn't a child. It wasn't human. The creature was covered in dark fur, matted and dirty. Its body was humanoid but wrong. The proportions were off. The arms too long. The legs bent in a way that suggested they were built for both walking upright and running on all fours. The hands had fingers, but they ended in claws. And the head. The head was canine. A long snout, pointed ears pressed flat against its skull. Eyes that reflected my flashlight with that distinctive animal eyeshine. Yellow-green. Bright and terrified. It was injured. I could see that immediately. Its left leg was bent at an unnatural angle. Broken. And there was blood dark against the dark fur, matting the fur on its side. It had been hurt badly. And it was young. I don't know how I knew that, but I did. Something about its size, the way it cowered, the pitch of its crying. This wasn't an adult. This was a child. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. My brain was screaming at me. Run. This is dangerous. This isn't real. This can't be real. But I couldn't move. Because the creature's eyes. Those eyes held something I recognized. Fear. And underneath it all, intelligence. Awareness. This thing knew it was dying. It knew it was alone. It knew what fear was. Its mouth moved. The snout opened slightly, showing sharp teeth. And it spoke. The voice was wrong, distorted by a mouth not made for human speech. But the words were clear. Please. Don't hurt me. I actually stumbled backward. My phone almost slipped from my hand. It spoke. This creature, this impossible thing, it spoke English. It knew what I was. It was asking me for mercy. I'm not going to hurt you, I heard myself say. My voice sounded distant, like someone else was speaking. Are you okay? Stupid question. Obviously it wasn't okay. But what else do you say? How do you communicate with something that shouldn't exist? Hurt, said. The voice was struggling, each word seeming to take enormous effort. Can't. Find. Find what? I asked, kneeling down slowly, trying to appear less threatening. Find who? Mother. The creature's eyes welled up with tears. Actual tears that caught the moonlight. Lost. Scared. My heart broke. Right there, in that moment, facing something that every rational part of me said was dangerous, was impossible, my heart shattered. Because I recognized that emotion. I'd seen it 1,000 times in my classroom. The look of a child who's lost, who's hurt, who just wants their parent and doesn't understand why they're alone. I made a decision that might have been the stupidest or the bravest thing I've ever done. I climbed down into the depression and sat next to the creature. Not touching it, but close enough that it could feel my presence. It flinched when I moved, pressed itself harder against the tree, but didn't try to run or attack. It's okay, I said softly. The same voice I use with scared kids at school. Reassuring. I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Sarah. Can you tell me your name? The creature looked at me with those intelligent, terrified eyes. For a long moment it said nothing. Then haltingly it spoke. No, name. Mother calls me. It struggled with something, then made a sound. Not a word. Vocalization. Something between a whine and a bark, but with a specific pattern. A name, I realized. This was its name, in whatever language its kind used. I can't say that, I admitted. Can I call you something else? Just so I can talk to you. Thought about this. Actually appeared to consider it. Then, you choose. I looked at this small, broken creature huddled in the darkness. How about Scout? Is that okay? The ears twitched. The closest thing to a nod I'd seen. Scout. Okay. We sat there in silence for a minute. I was trying to process what was happening. Trying to figure out what to do. This creature needed help. Medical help. But I couldn't exactly take it to a hospital. Couldn't call animal control. What do you even do in this situation? Scout, I said gently. I want to help you. But I need to know how you got hurt. What happened? The creature Scout was quiet for a long time. When it finally spoke, the words came slowly, broken by pauses. We were hunting, learning. Mother teaching. Took a shaky breath. Men came, loud. Bright lights. Guns. We ran. Fell. Down rocks. Mother couldn't. Stopped looking. Couldn't find. My stomach tightened. Men with guns. Hunting you. Always hunting. Scout's voice was filled with a sadness that seemed too heavy for something so young. Always running. Hiding. They want. To prove. We real. I thought about all the cryptid hunters I'd heard about. People who spent fortunes trying to find creatures like this. Who'd do anything for proof. For fame. For the money that would come from being the first to definitively prove Dogman exist. I'd always thought it was harmless. Silly. But sitting here, looking at this terrified child who'd been separated from its mother by people with guns and spotlights, it didn't feel harmless. Felt like hunting. Like cruelty. How long have you been here? Asked. 2 nights, 3. Don't know. Hurts, can't walk. Without food or water for 2 or 3 days. With a broken leg and internal injuries. This creature was dying. Slowly. Alone in the dark. Waiting for a mother who might never find it. I need you to stop for a second and think about what I'm telling you. Really think about it. This creature, this child, was lying in a forest dying because humans had scared it away from its family. And the incredible thing, the thing that still haunts me, is what it did next. Comment below. Tell me what you think happened. Tell me what you would have done in this situation. Because what happened next changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. Scout looked at me with those yellow-green eyes and said something I'll never forget. You. Different. You have kind eyes. Like mother. I started crying. Right there, sitting in the dirt next to this impossible creature. Tears running down my face. 'Cause I saw it then. Really saw it. Not a monster. Not a cryptid. Not a thing to be feared or hunted or proven. Person. Different from me, but a person nonetheless. With thoughts and feelings and a mother it loved and was desperately trying to get back to. I'm going to help you, I said. Promise. I'm going to try to find your mother. Okay. Scout's ears lifted slightly. How? Good question. How do you find a dogman? How do you even begin? I thought about Murphy still sitting on the trail. About tracking. About scent. Your mother, I said. Is she looking for you? Always. Scout said. She never stops. But I couldn't call. Too weak. Voice not carry. What if I call for her? What if I make noise? Will she come? Scout's eyes widened. Dangerous. She think. You hurt me. Then you tell her I'm helping. Okay. Can you do that? A slight nod. Try. I climbed out of the depression and returned to Murphy. He was exactly where I'd left him, looking miserable and confused. I knelt down and hugged him. "I need you to help me," I whispered to him. "I need you to be brave." I called out into the forest. Loud. Not words, just sound. A long, wavering call that echoed through the trees. Murphy joined me, barking. Together, we made enough noise to wake half the forest. I did this for 5 minutes, then stopped and listened. Nothing. Just night sounds. Insects. Wind. Called again. Waited. Still nothing. Scout's voice drifted up from the depression. Weak but clear. It was making sounds. Not human sounds. Vocalizations. A pattern that rose and fell, filled with urgency and pain. Calling for its mother in a language I couldn't understand but could feel. The universal sound of a child in distress. We waited. Called. Scout called. Murphy barked. 15 minutes passed. 20. I was starting to lose hope. Starting to wonder if Scout's mother was too far away or worse, if she'd been hurt or killed by those hunters. Then Murphy froze. His ears went flat, his body rigid. He was staring into the darkness past the trail. And I heard it. A step. Heavy ones. Moving fast through the underbrush. Coming toward us. I turned my flashlight in that direction. The beam caught something. Shape. Large. Moving between trees. Getting closer. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall, moving with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for something that size. The same canine features as Scout but fully grown. Adult. Powerful. It burst through the tree line and stopped about 30 feet away. We stared at each other. Scout's mother was terrifying. All muscle and fur and teeth and claws. Eyes that glowed in my flashlight beam. But those eyes weren't looking at me with aggression. They were scanning frantically, searching, until they locked onto the depression where Scout was. Scout called out. That same pattern of vocalizations, but louder now, excited. The mother's head snapped toward the sound. She took a step forward, then stopped. Looked at me. Looked at Murphy. We were between her and her child. I did the only thing I could think of. I stepped aside and pointed my flashlight at the depression. "Down there," I said. "Scout's hurt. Broken leg. Please." The mother tilted her head, studying me. Trying to understand why I wasn't running, why I wasn't threatening, why I was helping. Then she moved. Incredibly fast. In 2 strides she was at the depression, dropping down beside Scout. I heard sounds. Soft whines and whimpers. The universal language of reunion and relief. The mother was examining Scout, running her hands over the injuries, her vocalization urgent and questioning. Scout was responding, the pattern of sounds rising and falling. They were talking, communicating in detail. Scout was telling her what happened, what I'd done. The mother climbed out of the depression carrying Scout carefully in her arms. The child looked tiny against her, fragile. She stood there, holding her injured offspring, and looked at me for a long moment. The moonlight caught her eyes, and I saw it. Recognition, gratitude, understanding. She made a sound, low and rumbling, not threatening. Then she spoke. The voice was deeper than Scout's, more practiced at forming human words, but still distorted by her physiology. "Thank you." Each word deliberate, careful. "You saved my child." I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight. I just nodded. She took a step back. Then another. Still watching me. Still holding Scout. Then she said something else. Something I replay in my mind every single day. "You have good heart. Remember. Always remember. Sarah." She used my name. Scout must have told her. And then she was gone. Moving into the forest with a speed that shouldn't have been possible while carrying an injured child. Within seconds, they'd vanished completely. Like they'd never been there at all. I stood there for I don't know how long. Murphy pressed against my leg, both of us staring at the spot where they'd disappeared. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. I'd just had a conversation with a dogman. I'd helped reunite a family that shouldn't exist. I'd been thanked by a creature from folklore. The walk home was surreal. Everything looked normal. The trees, the trail, the moonlight. But nothing felt normal. Nothing would ever feel normal again. When I got home, I sat on my porch with Murphy until sunrise. Trying to process what happened. Trying to figure out what it meant. Told no one. Who would believe me? Had no proof. No photos. No evidence except my own memory and the dirt on my clothes from sitting in that depression. I went back the next day. Found the spot easily. There were signs. Disturbed earth. A few drops of blood. Claw marks on the oak tree. But nothing that proved what had happened. Nothing concrete. I continued my life. Went to work. Walked Murphy. But everything felt different. I looked at the forest differently now. Wondered what else was out there. What other impossible things were hiding in the spaces we don't look. Living their lives parallel to ours. Raising their children. Running from hunters. Trying to survive. 3 weeks after the encounter, something happened. I was walking the same trail with Murphy, middle of the afternoon this time. We reached the spot where I'd heard Scout crying. And there, placed carefully on a flat rock beside the trail, was something. Bird. Freshly killed. Placed deliberately. Left as a gift. It's happened twice more since then. Every couple of weeks I find something. Bird. Rabbit. Once, a beautiful piece of quartz crystal. Each time in the same spot. Each time positioned carefully, obviously intentional. Their gifts. Offerings. Scout and its mother thanking me. Letting me know they're okay. They remember. I've done research since that night. Deep research into Dogman sightings and encounters. There are hundreds of reports going back over a century. Most describe terrifying encounters, creatures that chase people or stare at them from the forest. But there are other reports too. Ones that don't get as much attention. People who've left food and found it gone. Hikers who've been lost and found strange markers leading them back to trails. Hunters who've been injured and somehow survived when they shouldn't have, later finding evidence that something had been watching over them. What if these creatures aren't the monsters we've made them out to be? What if they're just trying to live their lives, raise their families, survive in a world that keeps encroaching on their territory? What if the scary encounters happen because they're protecting their young or defending their space? What if they're just as scared of us as we are of them? Scout could have stayed silent. Could have hidden from me. Could have let me walk past. But it called for help. Trusted a human despite having every reason not to. And its mother could have attacked me. I was between her and her injured child. Any mother would have reacted with violence in that situation. But she didn't. She sized me up, saw that I was helping and trusted me. That trust, that choice to believe in kindness when you have every reason to expect cruelty, that's what haunts me. That's what keeps me up at night. Not fear. Not terror. Oh. The realization that intelligence and emotion and family bonds exist in forms we don't recognize. That we share this world with beings that are just as complex and feeling as we are, but we treat them like myths or monsters or things to be hunted. I think about Scout all the time. Wonder if the leg healed properly. If it's running and playing and learning to hunt with its mother. If it remembers that night. If it tells other young ones about the human with kind eyes who sat with it in the dark and promised to help. I like to think it does. I like to think that somewhere in the forests of Michigan, there's a young dogman who knows that not all humans are dangerous. That some of us see. Some of us understand. I'm telling this story because it needs to be told. Because these creatures, whatever they are, deserve better than to be hunted and feared and dismissed. Because Scout deserves to have its story known. The child who spoke to a stranger, who trusted when trust seemed impossible, who taught me more about compassion and bravery than any human ever has. If you've watched this far, if this story has moved you or made you think differently about what might be out there in the wild places, please do something for me. Hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and comment below. Tell me if you've ever had an encounter with something you couldn't explain. Tell me if you felt a connection with a creature that shouldn't exist. Tell me if you think I did the right thing that night, or if I was foolish to take the risk. I need to know that other people understand what I experienced. That I'm not alone in believing that there's more to this world than we acknowledge. That intelligence and emotion aren't limited to humans. That family and love and fear and hope exist in forms we're only beginning to recognize. I still walk those trails. Still bring Murphy on evening walks. But now I walk differently. I look at the shadows with curiosity instead of fear. I leave small gifts sometimes. Apples from my tree. Pieces of bread. I don't know if they're taken or eaten by regular animals or if Scout and its family find them. But I leave them anyway. My way of saying thank you. My way of maintaining the connection. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon is full, I hear vocalizations in the distance. Calls that might be coyotes or might be something else. Patterns that rise and fall with intention, with meaning. And I wonder if it's them. If they're out there living their lives, staying hidden, protecting their own. If Scout is growing up strong and brave. If it tells the story of the human teacher who sat with it in the dark and called its mother home. I sleep better now than I did in the weeks after it happened. The fear has faded. What remains is gratitude. Gratitude for that moment of connection. For being trusted by something that had every reason not to trust. For being part of something bigger than myself. For learning that the world is full of mystery and wonder and beings that deserve our respect and protection. The gifts still appear. Every couple of weeks. A reminder that I'm remembered. That what I did mattered. That somewhere in the forests, a family exists that knows my name and considers me a friend. That's the incredible thing that happened. Not the fact that I met a dogman. Not that it spoke to me. But that in that moment of connection, in that choice to help instead of flee, I became part of something ancient and profound. A bridge between two worlds. Proof that compassion transcends species. That when we choose kindness over fear, when we help instead of harm, we change not just one life but the entire relationship between humans and the unknown. Scout changed me. Changed how I see the world. Changed what I believe is possible. And I hope by telling this story that maybe it changes you too. Makes you look at the forests differently. Makes you wonder what else is out there, just beyond the reach of our understanding. Makes you consider that the next time you hear something in the darkness, it might not be a threat. Might be a neighbor. A fellow traveler on this strange and beautiful planet we all share. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing or at least being willing to consider belief. And if you ever find yourself face to face with something impossible, something that shouldn't exist, remember Scout. Remember that kindness is universal. That fear can be overcome. That sometimes, the most incredible thing that can happen is simply choosing to help when help is needed. They're out there. In the forest. In the wild places. Living their lives. And now you know, like I know, that they're not monsters. They're just trying to survive. Just trying to protect their families. Just trying to exist in a world that gets smaller every year. Be kind to them. Leave them in peace. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find a gift on a rock. A sign that you've been seen. That you've been understood. That somewhere in the darkness, something impossible knows your name and considers you a friend.